Kosher Terroir. I'm Simon Jacob, your host for this episode from Jerusalem. Before we get started, I ask that wherever you are, please take a moment and pray for the safety of our soldiers and the safe return of all of our hostages. The following conversation is with a truly remarkable winemaker, Alicia Wilbur. I met her for the first time quite a number of years ago when she came in from California to help host a charitable benefit dinner wine tasting for Nachum Siegel's network in New Jersey. I was initially very impressed with her wine skills and palate, but I've come to really appreciate her charming personality and depth of wine knowledge. She is the production winemaker for Herzog Cellars' flagship winery in Oxnard, California. That puts her in responsibility of all winemaking operational logistics for the entire winery. As a religious Jewish woman, she has set an incredibly high bar for the kosher wine industry, and a wonderful example to religious women and men wanting to make a career of this business. If you're in your car, please focus your attention on the road. If you're home relaxing, please grab a wonderful bottle of kosher wine, sit back, and listen in on this very special conversation. Welcome to the Kosher Terroir. Alicia, you have many professional responsibilities. How in the world do you do it all? Winemaking, family, kids, and even chickens. I don't know. That blew my mind, the chickens.
Well, first of all, there's no way to do it all. And secondly, thank God for Shabbat. Because if I didn't have that break every week, I certainly wouldn't be keeping my head the way that I do. It's a really beautiful day just to unwind and unplug and spend time with my family and our friends in the community. We have a lot of people come over every Shabbos. We have a lot of kids come by. We have a lot of adults come by. I go to a women's class every Shabbat afternoon. It's a really nice community.
Cool. Very cool. Very cool. So what's it like raising kids where you're located? Is it, are you in Oxnard proper, or where are you compared to that?
No, we are not in Oxnard. We're out a little further out, closer to technically to LA County, but we still live in Ventura County. We live in a small out-of-town community. We're part of a greater sort of out-of-town Lubavitch Chabad community. It's not like other Chabad communities that I've seen, in the sense that we actually have a pretty religious group of people that live here. So we have a minyan every week. There's no trouble getting a minyan on Erev Shabbos or Shabbos morning. We always do really big events and services for the holidays. There's a lot of kids around. I live 5 minutes from the hills. I'm constantly hiking with the dog or on my mountain bike or my road bike. Like, it's just a beautiful place to live. And technically we are only 15 minutes from the beach. If you go down the hill, down the road that we live on, we're about 15 minutes from Malibu.
I bet you the way back from Malibu is a lot more effort going back up the hill.
Yeah, it's a pretty rough hill, but it's a good ride. It's a good location.
Cool. Very cool. I noticed your chickens lay interesting colored eggs, not just white eggs. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes. So chicken eggs are, the color of the eggshell is dependent on the kind of chicken, the breed of chicken that it is. We have quite a few chickens, and they lay everything from light green eggs to bright blue to white to creamy to brown. And the interesting thing about chickens is that you can tell what the egg color is going to be by their earlobes. So they don't look like our earlobes, but they look like just patches of skin, and then they have a specific color, and that correlates to the color of the eggshell.
So if they have a white patch, that's white eggs, and if they have a blue, go ahead. Okay.
No, I was going to say it's Sheila. She's a little bantam, silky. She's so cute. She's got fluffy like feathers all down her feet, and she's just a very fluffy chicken. She's my oldest chicken. And she has really bright blue earlobes, and she lays these beautiful, like robin blue eggs.
Very cool. I didn't know that, and that's amazing. I didn't.
They helped a lot during Pesach. We were able to keep up with our egg needs for Passover cooking.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. Are you vegan or vegetarian? Do you eat chickens as well, or you only eat the eggs?
No, we've shechted our chickens.
Okay.
And when we hatched chickens last Passover, actually, and of 12 chicks that hatched, I think 7 ended up being boys or 6 ended up being roosters, and we can't keep roosters where we are.
Okay.
So we actually did kaparot for my husband with one of them, and then took them to a gentleman in LA, and he helped us. He shechted the chickens, and they made delicious soup for our table. They were really, I hope this isn't offensive, but I really do believe in eat what you grow. And,
Yep.
we had the opportunity to raise these chickens, and they were very healthy and they're, like even the shochet commented that they looked well raised when you
Very
saw them
cool.
from the other side.
So you were proud of your chicken raising capabilities.
Oh, yes.
Not
Who
only
knew?
children, but amazing. Amazing. I especially like the Polish speckled chicks who look like they have a Hasidic hat and everything, and they're just amazing looking. Crazy looking. You can't help but smile when you look at the pictures of them. They're really cool. All right. So there are many of my listeners who dream of joining the winemaking business. Let's talk a little bit about your origin story. Was there winemaking always a dream that you had, or where did it come from, and what's your origin?
My winemaking story is a funny story. It really is hashgacha pratis. I had no interest in it. I didn't know it existed growing up. We were raised in a very California reform household. We went to temple, we went to Sunday school and Hebrew school, and we had bat mitzvahs, me and my sister. And my extent of wine and my knowledge of wine was really like the bottle of Manischewitz on the holidays. And then my father would drink Kendall Jackson Chardonnay every night, or, Sutter Home, White Zinfandel. So that was really where I was exposed to it. But my dad would like sip wine and try to kind of talk himself through it, and I guess tried to be a bit of a connoisseur, but it wasn't anything anybody in my circle was really aware of. When I got a little bit older and I started working, one of the things I did for many, many years was work as a server in fine dining. And I was working at a restaurant in Los Gatos, actually across the street from where I would ultimately get married. And that was really my first exposure to fine wine. They had a fine wine list, and they had a sommelier, and they had, this staff that was very well trained in the art of serving wine. And the first wine that did it for me. Now, remember, my dad was drinking like KJ Chard,
Yeah.
was Rombauer Chardonnay, and it was probably, I don't know, a 1997 or early 2000s wine. I don't exactly know the vintage of it, but I had never tasted anything like that. I didn't know wine could taste like that. And it was really this light bulb moment. Concurrently, I was also working at that time for Hillel at UC Santa Cruz. And I got that position after going on Birthright and meeting all those people and meeting the director who was running that trip. He liked my personality. He thought I was funny. He thought I was smart. So he asked me to come in and do program coordination for UCSC Hillel. So as I was growing in my Jewish knowledge, I was also growing in my wine knowledge. And there was this epiphany point, which was probably some Shabbos dinner where we were like mixing Manischewitz with Baron Herzog White Zinfandel because that was just delicious. And I thought to myself,
Early
there's got to
blending.
be a better wine, like there has to be a better expression of wine than Manischewitz. And no offense to Manischewitz, because there's a lot of history there, and it's a really beautiful wine for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But that was really the moment, was like being at Hillel and doing these dinners for people and drinking this wine and realizing that there was a lot more than Manischewitz out there, because the whole Baron Herzog line was available to us. And then B, also learning how important kosher wine was for the whole experience. And even when I left Hillel and I was at Fresno State and I was studying to get my enology degree, my bachelor's of science in winemaking, I was involved with the temple there, Reform Temple, and they wanted me to come in and do like a Tu B'Shvat Seder for women. And I had a hard time securing kosher wine. And they were like, no, it's okay. You don't need kosher wine. And I was like, oh, yes, we do. And, even you really need kosher wine. So that's kind of where it started. And then also at that time when I was working for Hillel, I managed to meet Benjamin Kantz, who is Benyo, the famed winemaker of Four Gates wine. And he was good friends with Shalom, the director of UCSC Hillel at the time. We were doing a fundraiser at a beautiful home in Saratoga or something. And he had poured some Zinfandel and I was swirling and tasting and I made some comment and I used some word that was appropriate. And he looked at me right in the eyes and he went, oh, you know something about wine. And I was like, yes, I do. And I didn't know anything about it. But like here was this person with this incredible, I mean, you know him, you can see his neshama. Like he's just this incredible person and very humble and very giving. And for him to say that to me, and the community would go to his house and help him harvest and be there during Sukkot. And like there was a lot of involvement there. So he really was the impetus for turning the whole direction of my life towards winemaking.
Wow. So tell me a little bit about your education.
It's again, a lot of steps to get to a certain place. So while I was working for Hillel, the gal that had the similar position to me, program director at San Jose State, her father was a winemaker. Mm-hmm. And she suggested that I go speak to him and have like an informational interview. So I interviewed him and he suggested that I get my head out of winemaking and I get my feet into the vineyard and, don't study enology, go study viticulture. And while you're at it, go study viticulture in Australia because their government is really supportive of the wine industry and they pour a lot of money into research, agricultural research and winemaking research. And it would be a very good place to go learn. This person actually was one of the founders of biodynamic agriculture in California. So he was growing grapes in a biodynamic fashion in his St. Edna vineyard down in Paso, Santa Barbara area. And actually later, when I was in the Fresno State enology program, we would go visit him as part of our enology degree. And he was one of the people who was going to talk to the class. So anyway, I applied to the University of Adelaide. I got accepted to their viticulture program, and I was changing my life to go move to Australia. And that included moving to Sonoma, trying to get more experience in the wine industry. And there I met an Australian winemaker named Chris Loxton of Loxton Cellars. And he was like, what are you going to Australia for? You don't have to go so far away. You don't even have to go to Davis. You could go to Fresno State. Like, what are you doing? Like, go to Fresno State. And the people in Sonoma were very encouraging that I would go to Fresno State. And at that time, it was the only place in the United States that had a commercial winery that students ran. So all positions in the winery from cellar to bottling to the lab were run by students. So I started that program in 2005 and I graduated in 2008. The first day of school, the first day of class, Enology 101, Professor Thornton asked us all, why were we here? What were we doing? What did we want to do? And I raised my hand and I was like, I'm going to make kosher wine. And I didn't know what it meant. Like literally looking back on it now, I had no idea. But it didn't matter. Like that's what I was going to do. I was going to make kosher wine. And that's what I set out to do. And thank God it's the only kind of wine I've, since I got my degree that I've ever made. In the course of getting that degree, I got married and had my first child. And just telling the young ladies here that when I ended up finding out that I was pregnant, I still had 1 year to go. And I went to all my professors before the fall, because of course, naturally being a winemaker, my two of my daughters were born in, they're Tishrei babies. So they're like right between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur in the middle of harvest. Yep. Perfect time for bat mitzvah. And we have a bat mitzvah coming up this year, actually. Anyway, I went to my microbiology professor and I said, I'm going to be missing some classes in the fall because I'm having a baby. And she looked at me and she's like, you'll never do it. You'll never pass. You'll never make it. And, you tell me that, you're going to bet that I'm going to make it, right? So here we are. I made it. all good. But yeah, I had my chaya when I was a senior in college. I was a little bit older. And then actually the last day of finals, I was working on my last final for, I don't know, some paper, and I was simultaneously checking winejobs.com. And the only two search terms I would ever search were kosher or Israel. And I was typing in kosher and working on my term paper, and all of a sudden this job popped up at Herzog Cellars. And this was in 2008. And I applied and I went down. I was invited. Joe Hurleman called me back and he invited me down to Oxnard from Fresno. And I met with him and I spent 8 hours there at the winery. And I met everyone that was there at that time. I met Josh and Zev and Joseph and the whole crew, the whole mishpacha. And Joe took me to lunch at Tierra Sur. And like, I think literally the next day they offered me the job. And that was a big moment, right? Because I had gone to school and I had made this goal for myself that I was going to work in kosher winemaking. And then here I am, like at the precipice of graduation, and all of my friends are leaving to France or South America or I don't know, wherever they're going. And they're all getting these internships in Napa or Paso. And I got offered this position at Herzog. And it was overwhelming. And at the same time, my husband had been offered a position in Wisconsin in his industry. And because I had this 8-month-old and because he had this opportunity that would allow me to stay home, I said, thank you, but no, thank you. I can't accept this offer right now. So I didn't do it. I stepped away from wine and raised my daughter. And then, of course, 6 months later, that company folded and laid everybody off. So we were in the middle of the US in Wisconsin. Beautiful place, by the way. Fantastic people. Some of the best people in the whole world are in Wisconsin. And my husband was unemployed for a little while. And, I had this baby. We didn't have anything that we were doing. And my husband ended up finding work in New York. So we moved further east, all the way to New York. In Westchester County. I had my second child there. And when he turned a year old, I decided it was time to go back to work. And what are you going to do? You're not going to, I didn't want to be a secretary, So at that time, I had heard about the Court of Master Sommeliers, and I decided to pursue a certification in being a sommelier. So I passed the introductory course that was up at the CIA up in the Hudson Valley. Okay. And then I took the certifying course in Manhattan and became a certified sommelier. And then I helped open a wine restaurant in Larchmont, New York. So shout out to Vintage 1891 on Larchmont Avenue in Larchmont, New York. I became their wine director.
I happen to know where that is. I happen to know. My wife, when I met her, was actually living in Larchmont, New York. Surprisingly.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, wow, is right. So,
actually, yes. Jonathan Actorloni, our manager of the restaurant, is from Larchmont as well.
It's a small world, very small world. Yeah.
Very small.
Very cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was doing that, and I happened to I was like active on LinkedIn, and I was actually visiting my mom in California, was there with the kids. And I'll never forget, we were on the freeway. We were driving like south on 101 to go to some splash pad or something. And my phone rings and I pick it up and it's like Joe Hurleman on the screen. I was like, what is Joe Hurleman, doing, calling me? It's 4 years later, right? Because it's 2012 at this point. And he called me and he said, do you ever think about getting back into the winemaking business? And I was like, yes, I do. Every once in a while. I think about
big smile, big smile,
big smile, just like totally jumping up and down in the car. And, when I went back to New York, he invited me to KFWE and I came to KFWE and I met him there. And then that started the ball rolling. And he sent me to Bayonne to meet with Joseph Mutti and David and Shelley. And, that like was super intimidating, not least of all because of that drive and like where Bayonne is and going there by myself. But I met with everybody and the rest is history, as they say. And I came in June of 2013 to California to start with Herzog.
Very cool. Very cool. You constantly mention Jewish and kosher as being extremely important to your identity. Anything special you want to tell me about that? I mean, how did that come about? And we've gotten a feel for it, but it seems to kind of be one of the core values in your career.
So when I was 18, I had graduated high school, and I went and I moved to Paris, France, or a suburb of Paris, as an au pair. And I was paired with a Sephardi family, a Sephardi Jewish family. Just incidentally, I didn't, request that. And the kids were 7, 12, and 17. And it was my first time away from home. I had literally just graduated high school. Technically, I was 17 when I graduated. So when I had moved to France, I was 17. And I was with this family and going through the Hagim in the fall and feeling kind of out of sorts and not knowing what was going on. And then we got to Hanukkah and talking to the little boy. And I was asking him, like, do you know what the letters on the dreidel mean? And he didn't know what the letters on the dreidel meant. And I've always had kind of a conscientious relationship with Hanukkah anyway, just because it's this, right? It's this holiday about remaining true to who you are and standing very strong and against being assimilated. And it kind of has become this very, especially for someone who grew up Reform, like it's a very assimilated holiday. A lot of associations with that time of year and, being in public school systems and what those expectations were for that. So I was really floored, as this 18-year-old, just totally floored that this kid didn't know what the letters on a dreidel meant. Like,
yeah.
I wasn't affiliated. I wasn't particularly religious at that time. And even I knew what those letters meant. So I came home and I don't even know how it happened, but again, it must have been Hashgacha Pratis. But there was a store in Los Gatos called Aleph Bet Judaica. And I went there and I was talking to, I believe her name was Narit, the woman who ran the store, and kind of telling her my experience. And she said, you should read this book. It's called The 9 Questions People Ask About Judaism by Rabbi Joseph Telushkin and Dennis Prager. And I read that book and it changed my life. So they have this phrase in that book that they're constantly saying, not yet. So do you keep kosher? Not yet. Do you wrap tefillin if you're a man? Not yet. Like, it's not saying no. It's not this hard no. It's giving the possibility for this in your future. But at the time, you're not doing it. So after I read that book, I actually started keeping kosher to the best of my abilities. And I just want to say, like, I didn't get religious through a rabbi or a movement. I read a lot of books on my own and was constantly, the flame of your neshama is like seeking that greater connection. So I just read a lot of books. And it's actually funny because I think maybe the year after we moved to Oak Park and I joined the winery, Rabbi Telushkin came to our Chabad house, our Chabad area actually it was the Four Seasons in Westlake, and he gave a lecture. And I brought my book, The 9 Questions People, ask about Judaism. And here I am, and I'm wearing like a gorgeous dress with like the collar up to here, and my everything's covered in a minishaitel. And it was like just such this 180-degree change from where I was when I read the book to handing him this book and saying, will you please sign it for me? And this whole, changed my life. So I don't know, it was just always my neshama was seeking more, and it's very important to me, and raising my children this way, and, naming my first daughter Chaya, even though we didn't live in like a community where anybody was named Chaya. And then when we moved to California to a community where she was one of 8 Chayas in her class,
Wow.
It's fun. It's really fun.
Very cool. How did that impact you from a winemaking perspective? I mean, being kosher, being in winemaking, did you feel that was a limitation?
Pardon?
I guess, did you feel that was a limitation, being kosher and winemaking?
No, because like I said, it's the only winemaking that I ever knew. Okay. So yes, I've worked for Chris Loxton, and I did end up working for B.R. Cohen. For B.R. Cohen, I was working in the tasting room, and for Chris, I was working in the cellar. But when I tell you I didn't even understand what the pH scale meant, when I was working for Chris, I was very, very green. And he was a pretty non-interventionist winemaker to begin with. So it's not like, and I would say at Fresno State, it's not like they're teaching you the fundamentals of winemaking. So it's not like they're teaching you to use all of these extras or additives, So what there's yeast and there's acidulation and there's enzymes and stuff. And so when I was starting to make wine in a kosher way, it wasn't a limitation. It was an extra step to take, but I never saw it as a limitation. I will say when I talk to people who make wine in a non-kosher way, like in just a regular commercial winery, like they're astonished by the limitations that we have, by the calendar, first of all. Like I said earlier, the Hagim happened in harvest. And like, I'm pretty sure that was Hashem's way of saying, like, I know this is really tough, but it's really going to work out for you better ultimately because you can rest and you don't have to work, 7 days a week, 18 hours a day for 3 months out of the year. You're forced to take a break and step away. Obviously, that has logistical, its own set of logistical nightmares. And as a winemaker, and you're walking away for sometimes it's 5 days at a time. Like it depends on how the holidays fall, But if like you have Erev Shabbos and then say Erev Yontif is on a Sunday, you can conceivably be out for 5 days because we're in America. So remember, we have the extra Yontif
days,
like you. And you have to trust in your cellar. You have to trust in the way that you've trained your winemaking team, your cellar guys, that everybody is managing cellar health well, and everybody is really conscientious of best practices and precision winemaking and French techniques. And you have to ultimately trust your people, and more than that, you have to trust in God. You have to trust that Hashem is ultimately in charge of all of the processes, and it's going to work out. Like we're not doing brain surgery. We're not curing cancer. We're allowing people to make smachot and simchas and kiddush and that kind of thing, which is very important and very holy. But it's, at the end of the day, it's not like life or death. Thank God.
Yeah, no. Well, you're allowing people to make brachot, which is very cool. Which is really cool.
Actually, I wanted to touch when we met. It's funny because I was thinking about that. And that was at like a sushi restaurant, I believe.
Yeah, it had sushi, but yes, it did.
Oh, it had. Okay, my apologies.
No, it was a broader menu, but it was sushi too.
It was a beautiful restaurant, and it was a really lovely, really lovely dinner and a really lovely experience. And I met the Gellers at that time.
Yep,
that was
Gabriel and Yael.
Yeah, and Yael. And it's so funny because I've thought about that moment many times. Like Yael met me, and I think she was excited because I'm a woman and wine, and we could like chat about these things. And she hands me a glass, and she's like, "Tell me what you think." And I got the glass and I was swirling and I put my nose in it and I was like, "Oh, you like Burgundy and Pinot Noir." And it floored her because she didn't tell me what it was, but it happened to be a Burgundy and Pinot. Yeah. But like, it's a pretty distinct, like if it's made in a certain way, it's a pretty distinct nose and aroma and everything. So it was just a fun moment because it was like, a lot of people think that stuff is parlor tricks, but it's really not. Like it's what I do as a job. I'm a professional winemaker, so I have to be able to taste and discern and smell things. So it's not a parlor trick, I promise you. It's just that we practice, we do it every day. But it was experience. It was a fun moment.
It's really experience. It's interesting. Yael is a very special person, and because Gabe Geller has such incredible skills. She's kind of like, people look at Yael and say, "Oh, she's Gabe's wife," but to be honest, she is an incredible. She has an incredible palate, and she's an incredible wine person herself. And she was that long before she met Gabe. I mean, she'll tell you about her secret closet where she hid all of these bottles of wine away from everybody else's, ability to grab them. So she's a really really special person. While you're bringing that up, I mean, there are very few women in the winemaking business, and you're one of the most prominent. There are some, but you're one of the most prominent. How has the journey influenced you? And
well, I would hope that externally, that people, when they come in the winery and they see me like just this morning, I was downstairs on the floor in the cellar, and I'm in my skirt and I'm in my shaitel and I've got my high vis jacket on, and I'm like popping bungs off barrels and sticking my face in the bung because we were blending, and I need to make sure that all the barrels are sound, that we can use them for what we're doing. So there's like hundreds of barrels laid out on the floor, and I'm just down there like sticking my face in barrels. And you've been to the winery, it's like a fishbowl. People can't come onto the floor because we're kosher, but there's all these windows so they can see down into what we're doing. And like my greatest hope is that when I'm doing something like that, that's kind of bordering ridiculous, but really kind of cool, like if you don't know exactly what it is that I'm doing, I hope that there are women watching. I hope that there are girls, there with their families and they're having lunch and they decide to take the tour and they see me down there, or they walk by and they see me in the lab and they see me prepping some kind of, scientific assay or whatever it is. I think it's really important to be visible and really important to be proud. And the fact that I'm obviously a Jewish woman, like there's a lot of pride in that. And in terms of, I don't really know anything else. This is my experience, and it's the only experience that I have. So I can't compare what it's like to be a man in the winemaking world, and I can't compare what it's like to be a non-religious winemaker, because all I know is the life that I've lived. I wish there were more of us. I wish it wasn't so intimidating, but I think that wine in general intimidates people. And it's like I said earlier, they think it's a parlor trick, or they think that you have to have some special gift or ability when really it's just practice. It's like anything. Like, I forget who wrote the book, but the book is Your Brain on Music. And his hypothesis, or his whole thesis is that it's practice more than talent that defines a good musician. And you can say the same, I think, for anything, right? There's the 10,000 hours or whatever. Like, if you commit to doing something and you commit to doing it well, it doesn't matter if you were born with an innate palate or talent for dragging hoses or making a clean rack when you're transferring wine. All these skills can be learned, and thankfully I've been I've had the opportunity to learn those skills and practice those skills. And it's not something I take lightly. Like, it's really an honor to do what I do and to know that the product that I make is on people's table every week without fail. Maybe not all the products that I make, and maybe some people turn their nose up to some of the products that we make, or they're not to their taste, and that's fine, because thank God at Herzog we literally make something for everyone.
Yep.
Except for me, my favorite things are like really weird Mediterranean whites, and we don't as of yet make a Sirteco or Vermentino or anything like that. I keep lobbying for it, but so far I don't think I have much of a fan base in terms of weird Mediterranean whites.
There's some really
everything from bubbles to dry reds to big cabs. Like there's something for everyone.
Yeah, there's some really great, incredible Mediterranean whites coming into the country in a kosher. So it's
I know.
Pretty, yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Is the winemaker Ido or Ira from is it Barkstein? He's the master of wine, and he has that.
Yes, Ido's a master of wine here. Yeah, and he's here.
Gorgeous, beautiful.
And also, as far as female winemakers, Elvie, who brings in a bunch of different wines from Spain. Moses and his son David are amazing running that winery, but actually they're the front men.
Yeah.
The people who run the winery and make the wine are Moses' wife and David's sister, Moses' daughter, are the production and the winemakers, and actually the people who are putting that out, and they're awesome people. So
yeah, I have had the pleasure of meeting them at KFWE, and hopefully someday when I take my trip to Spain and Priorat, I will go visit them.
Yeah, I think that would be an incredible thing, because though Moses speaks well, and he's very involved with biodynamic wines and sustainability, his wife is really the key in that, and it would be great for you to meet. I think her name is Anna. She's really amazing, an amazing person. I hope I remembered the name right, and it would be great for you to meet. In fact, I don't know why they don't get winemakers cross-pollinating a little bit across. They've got such a global reach at Herzog that I don't know why they don't mix the winemakers up more and more. I know they mix the distribution people up, the salespeople, but it would be cool to mix up the winemakers a little bit, because there's all sorts of techniques and things that you can learn from that. So that would be a cool idea to do.
Mean, the Royal portfolio is pretty incredible, with a lot of talented people. It's a really beautiful, it's a really great family to be a part of.
Great. Crazy. Okay. So I believe you helped pioneer, in Herzog, the sustainability and biodynamic wines, especially with the Belief brand. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Certainly. So Belief, or doing an organic wine in general, was, I believe, Morty Herzog's idea. Okay. And there was a lot of discussion for putting it in, which brand are we going to put it under, which placement is it going to get? And at that time, I was spearheading variations in Jeunesse, and I lobbied very hard to get Belief put into the variations line. Organic farming and organic practices and organic food are something that's very important to me. It's the way I feed my family. It's the way I grow my garden. I think I may have mentioned to you in passing that when we lived in New York, we were part of this underground organic egg exchange, getting eggs from Amish farmers in Pennsylvania. So it's always been something that's been really, really important to me. And it's not just a buzzword. It's not just trendy, it's something that's really meaningful. So I lobbied hard to get it under the variations line. And in 2019, we came out with it. And it is interesting because when we went through the certification process with CCOF, which is our certifier, we're not USDA certified, but we are CCOF certified, which is the California certification of organic farmers. And when they came in, and there's all this paperwork and there's all these hoops and there's all this scrutiny from the certifying agency, and it was like a breeze because I'm already used to having Rebbeim, have their hechsherim on our bottles, and we have a lot of scrutiny and a lot of paperwork, and you can't just add something to the wine. You have to get approval. You have to put it through this whole step. Even if it seems innocuous, you have to get it approved. And it was like that with the organic. So it was like, oh, okay, this is not so bad. So for me, doing that paperwork wasn't so difficult, and making that jump to being a certified organic, or making wine with certified organic grapes, because our facility is not certified organic. Obviously, we do commercial wine and organic wine, but it really, it's been a fun process. It's something that means a lot to me. I'm still the winemaker for Belief. I'm still the face of that product, and we've been doing it since 2019, and obviously with David Galzignato coming on board, he's actually the one that pioneered biodynamics in Herzog. And I've been able to take what I've learned with him with biodynamics and apply it to the Belief project. But, we don't have Demeter certification, so we're not making any claims that we're biodynamic certified. It's a philosophy that informs a lot of our decision making. Mm-hmm. And it's neat because it's trickled down into my garden. So I garden by the biodynamic calendar as well. So it's really come full circle for us.
I was going to say it impacts everything, especially your calendar, which in winemaking is the world. Yes. Everything is driven by calendar, and in today's world where we pick up a phone and order food, and it gets delivered in 20 minutes, even in Jerusalem, it's kind of crazy now. We have a thing called Walt, which is kind of like Uber Eats. And you just pick up a phone, and I can get any kosher restaurant in Jerusalem, any restaurant in Jerusalem for that matter, and order food, and it arrives on the doorstep in minutes. And that's what producing food is about here. And it's kind of crazy that this is something that you can't get. You have a calendar, a set calendar that you have to deal with and work through. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It's the same with kosher.
Yeah.
It's immovable.
You were involved with Jeunesse making really one of the largest kosher wines in the world. wine is very subjective. People have different tastes and what have you. But what was that like going through and tasting and blending such a quantity of wine and having such a fan base is really kind of crazy. So, what was that like?
Yeah. So, I'm the production winemaker. So I haven't stepped away from the winemaking role. It's just that I'm focusing now on everything as opposed to just having a narrow focus.
Yeah.
It's focused on everything. So I'm still blending and tasting and going through all these things and making jeunesse, and my hands are still in that wine. Jeunesse, I have a soft spot for it. Like it's not even the kind of wine that I want to drink. I'm not into sweet wines. But I think for what it is, it's a varietally correct, sweet Cabernet. I totally think that the Jeunesse Chard is a sleeper Chardonnay. Like it's a wonderful Chardonnay. Especially if you want to be a little bit above, like slightly sweet. It's not as sweet as the Jeunesse Cab in terms of its actual RS level, but I totally think it's just this sleeper wine that everybody passes on because Baron is obviously so good. Or if you're not going there, you're going to Russian River, right, which is a whole different animal in itself.
Yeah.
But don't sleep on the Jeunesse Chard, guys. Like, check it out; it's really good. Actually, somebody recently sent an invitation to their wedding that was addressed to the Jeunesse winemaker, the Jeunesse family at the Jeunesse winery. It's my favorite wine. I hope you'll come to the wedding. And it was so cool because who invites like a wine brand to their wedding? That was just so sweet and touching. And I really appreciate you, who you are, if you're listening to this, and hopefully something special is coming your way. But yeah, it's got a big fan base, and it's also, I don't know if you're on Facebook at all. I think you are, and if you're in the Kosher Trader Joe's group. But man, sometimes those discussions about Bartonura or Sarah B or Jeunesse, like, take it easy, guys. Like, there's a person behind that, like, it's not just something that appears on a shelf that has no personal involvement. Like, we're actual people making something that we're proud of, and it's not soda, and even if it was Coca-Cola, like, I'm sure the people who make Coca-Cola are proud of making Coca-Cola. Like, so just remember that there's people behind all of these things.
So I want to clear up and I believe an error. People feel like, things like Moscato and what have you are just simply a little bit of grape juice and a lot of sugar and water that are mixed together to produce such things. And they don't even grasp that they're actually wine, and that there's this consistency that you have to hit in producing this product every day. And it's just like, is there any, like in Jeunesse, do you add any sweeteners to it, any sugars or what have you?
Jeunesse is a little bit of a different animal than, say, like doing Moscato by W, or because we make a lot of Muscat, right? We make the Jeunesse pink Moscato, the black Muscat. A lot of Moscatos are made by us. The family makes Bartonura. And I think that people don't understand that there's this big difference between, like, in Italy, if you're buying a bottle of Moscato, it's practically like the day after it finishes fermenting and is in a bottle. Like, it's super fresh. It's just this really fresh, lively experience. And, so we're maybe not as fresh as that because we have more time between when we bottle and when it gets to the market here in America. But it's a fun, fresh, lively wine that has a lot of personality, and you have to like those aromatics in order to like Moscato. But there's absolutely, it's not soda. It does have alcohol. It's not made in a way that is trying to dupe anybody. Like, it's an honest, it's an honest wine.
Yeah, it's a wine. And
in Italy, it's a DOCG, right? Like, there's Moscato d'Asti, like, it's a legally protected wine. Like, it's not just like basement stuff.
Right. No. Well, I was actually in Asti at the factory where they make the blue bottles. And it's amazing,
isn't it?
What?
It's amazing that their plant is amazing.
It's awesome. It's huge, and it's just an awesome place. And what amazes me is that this is a natural product. You're picking grapes and you're producing this, and the blending gets this consistency between over a period of time that's just wow. The amount of effort that goes into producing that on a consistent basis that way is just crazy to me. It's a very big deal, and people don't get it. They go, it's it's soda, but it is absolutely not. So okay, any winemaking challenges that you had in the past that were particular challenges that you encountered and you made your way through them?
I mean, that's a big question, right? Every year,
It's a
every
challenge.
harvest is like a whole universe unto itself. And every harvest, everyone's surprised by how hard harvest is. And it's like we've never done it before, like we haven't been doing it for a decade or 2 decades or 3 decades. But no matter who you are, no matter which winery you work in, no matter what function your role is at a winery, if you've been touched by harvest, you know what I'm talking about. And every harvest presents its own unique set of challenges. So we never know, and you think, I have all this experience. I know what I'm getting into. I know I'm going to be working very late. I know I'm not going to see my family. I know I'm going to be working so hard. And then it happens and you're just like, oh my gosh, I've never done this before in my life. It's like brand new every year. Last year, harvest was really late. So bud break was late. The weather was weird. So I don't think we brought in wine till 23 days later than our average first pick date.
Wow.
So I'm coming in on, I've been there over a decade, and we almost always harvest and bring in our first load of Pinot Grigio on my birthday, which is in mid-August. And last year we didn't bring wine in until September 11th. We didn't bring grapes in until September 11th. And that delay affected everything, right? So there was one point, I don't know, I posted it on my Facebook. It was like I was raking late harvest Chenin Blanc out of a bin, and it was the same day we had brought in like one of our high-end Cabernets, and like the day before we had like Chardonnay. So like, in what world are you harvesting Cabernet at the same time you're harvesting Chardonnay? Like, it's just, I've never had a harvest like that. And there were some specific challenges with the ratio of sugars that we were dealing with. So we had some fermentations that just needed a little extra help, a little extra oomph, a little extra hand holding and massaging to get through. Because obviously every winemaker's nightmare is a stuck fermentation. So when you're doing it to something like a Moscato, or you're doing it to something like a late harvest, I misspoke, by the way, that wasn't a late harvest Chenin Blanc that we were working on. It was something different. But when you're doing a late harvest, oftentimes we stop those wines prematurely because we're going for a specific alcohol level or RS level. But if the wine does that by itself, and it's a very expensive cab from Napa, and it stops at 2 grams per liter or 3 grams or 4 grams per liter, you're kind of sitting there, you're like, oh, what do I do now? But it's certainly not independent to my experience. Like, this is a universal winemaker experience, is the dreaded stuck fermentation. And we managed to get through it. We were very careful, paid a lot of attention, held a lot of grapes in our hands, and we're like, come on, guys, you can do it. And we got through it. So who knows what it'll be like this year, but I certainly hope it's not late, because late was a very distinct logistical challenge.
Wow. What about climate change? Is that impacting the harvests? Does that impact biodynamics and all the other elements that are going on?
Well, biodynamics seeks to work with harmony in nature, right? So whatever nature's throwing at you, biodynamics is going to be in harmony with that. So it's a good tool to work in tandem with something like climate change. Here in California, obviously we have fires to contend with, whether or not that's climate driven because of drought and rising temperatures and all that kind of stuff. Whatever the cause is, that we have fires, right? So we have, I was even evacuated. I talked to you about being 15 minutes from the beach, living on this road that I live on. And during the Woolsey fire in 2017, I believe, we got evacuated, and like, it was just a standstill because it's the only road to get out of our town. And the flames are like coming over the car and over the the houses, and it was quite scary. And we had fires for many years in a row, and it even impacted what we released in 2020. I don't know if you were reading the news in 2020, but there were fires all up and down California, from Paso to Napa. And, the winemakers and the insurance industry and the labs, like everybody was hustling, trying to figure out how do you deal with wines that's going to have smoke taint. And this brings my story back to Australia, because the Australian Wine Research Institute, AWRI, has done incredible research on smoke taint because, unfortunately, they've dealt with a lot of fires in their vineyards in the past decade or two. So they have a lot of protocols for dealing with smoke taint and for detecting it before it becomes such a terrible issue. But, thank God, because we make a lot of things like Jeunesse and Rashi, because that is a big commercial product, it allows us to have a little leeway when we have smoke taint and something that might be a little higher end. The family made the decision not to release certain wines in 2020 because they just weren't up to our quality standards. And not everybody has that. Not everybody is at the level or size that they can do something like that. Not release a wine in a year. Because think about it. If your whole livelihood is tied to Mother Nature and Mother Nature's on fire, what are you going to sell?
Right. I have an interesting question. This is a little bit of a curveball. If you were going back to your younger self with the experience and the knowledge you have now, what advice would you give yourself?
Hold on tight.
Yeah, that's good advice. That's good advice.
Yeah, it's funny. I was with a good friend, and we were driving down to LA. We were going shtetl shopping, and we're in the car. We were chatting with each other, and she's a very successful woman. And I said something, and she said something. We both looked at each other, and she was like, "Could you imagine telling your 17-year-old self this is where you were going to end up, driving down to go wig shopping on a Sunday, on purpose, when you have your own?" I don't know. It was a funny thing, and I'm so thankful for it. I'm so thankful for it. I wouldn't change anything that I've been through, and I wouldn't take away, some of the more wild times in my life. And I'm very thankful that I had them, and I'm thankful that I could give my children a different experience growing up. But yeah, it's just, I guess I would tell myself that it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay.
Very cool. Very cool. Alicia, thank you very, very much for being on the Kosher Terroir. I don't know. Do you have?
Thank you for having me.
It's absolutely a pleasure. It's something that it's something I was trying to do for a while, actually, and I couldn't figure out how to reach out to you properly to get a hold of you and ask. But when you so kindly said, "Yeah, I'd like to do that," I said, "Done." Okay.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Have
Shalom
a great
Abraham.
week.
You
Thank
too.
you.
Be well. This is Simon Jacob again, your host of today's episode of the Kosher Terroir. I have a personal request. No matter where you are or where you live, please take a moment to pray for our soldiers' safety and the safe and rapid return of our hostages. Please subscribe via your podcast provider to be informed of our new episodes as they are released. If you're new to the Kosher Terroir, please check out our many past episodes. And thank you for listening to the Kosher Terroir.